Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening overseas via the web. Today is Monday, the 23rd of March, 2015. I trust that you had a great weekend here in the Cayman Islands or wherever you may have been on the weekend. Weather here in the Cayman Islands, pretty good. No rain. We hope to start getting some rain soon. We certainly need it to ensure that all of our plants, our trees, and everything will be properly nourished. And of course, further on down the line, if we get that rain, then crab season will start to come in, fairly soon, as well. And I'm sure that many of you are looking forward to that also. Our streaming audio is up and running, should be up and running now as well. So those of you who rely on the internet to hear Radio Cayman, you should be hearing us now and should be able to participate also if you want to in our talk show here on For the Record or any other program that is done by Radio Cayman. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is designed specifically for you, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you can join me every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open, and there is always someone waiting to take your calls, normally in the form of Miss Susan, unless she has a day off, and then Paul is normally on there as well when Miss Susan is off. And of course, you can reach us on our toll-free number, which is provided by Lime. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 or 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the show, directly on the show, then you can also email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at CANDW.KY. Let's look at some of the headline news. We see where the accused persons in the CNB robbery, after a retrial, they have all been convicted again. So that is a notch for the DPP's office, for the police as well, having a second successful conviction or successful trial again. Of course, everything is usually subject, or most things are usually subject to appeal. So we will see where that goes, from here. But at least for now, we have a conviction on the books for them. Let's look at some international news as well, and we see where Singapore has lost its founding father, who is known as the founder of modern-day Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. He passed away, so they're mourning him. He is seen as he set about creating a highly educated workforce that was fluent in English And he also reached out to foreign investors to turn Singapore into a manufacturing hub. That is a feat that several leaders have tried to emulate, have tried to copy and use as a model for development in their countries. Not many have been as successful as he has been. He embarked on a program to clear slums, also to industrialize, and also to tackle corruption. Tackling corruption is a huge, huge issue for undeveloped, and developing countries as well. Corruption not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. Again, a huge challenge that is faced by political leaders. He was also a fierce advocate of a multiracial Singapore, something, again, that many countries would want to embrace and emulate. He also introduced tight controls, and one of his legacies was a clampdown on the press, tight restrictions that remain in place today. Of course, when you talk about restrictions on the press in democratic societies, that is something that is always debated. But again, it's a situation where we know, for instance, there are countries where the press will set out, and particular sections of the press will set out to bring down a government, sometimes, many times, democratically elected governments as well. So the press is not always as innocent and squeaky clean as they may appear to be. In this case, he set about placing restrictions, on the press, something that would not necessarily endear him to many people as well. He didn't accept political dissent easily also. So to a certain extent, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, ruled Singapore with an iron fist, as well as bringing modernization and development to Singapore at the same time. So that is one of the headline stories in the international news today. We see also where the case, and Mr. McPhail and I talked about this on Friday, Mr. Steve McPhail on For the Record. We didn't discuss it on the air, but we saw where now costs have been awarded in the Hewitt case, the challenge against the Minister Tara Bush in relation to her candidacy and her election in the District of West Bay. So costs have been awarded to that. We don't know what the dollar figure is, but I would imagine that you can expect it to be fairly high. QCs don't come cheaply in the Cayman Islands, nor anywhere else, for that matter. So we'll see how that plays out at the end of the day. You may wonder why I'm continuing to talk so much, and I'll continue to do that for a while. We're scheduled to discuss the household budget survey in the Cayman Islands today, and we're expecting representatives from the Ministry of Finance, hopefully someone from the Economic and Statistics Office, the ESO, to be in the studio as well. We have not received any confirmation yet, but we're hoping that they will be here to discuss the household budget survey. If not, I'll have to discuss it by myself, or you'll have to discuss it with me, or we can go off to other topics as well. I want to talk about something that is fairly close to my heart and something that I enjoy doing, and that is cycling as well. Yesterday, there was we call it either a circuit race or a criteria, more of a circuit race that took place around in the area of the Regatta complex, right in front of the governor's house. I think that that complex there where Price is Right or Cost You Less? Where Cost You Less is located. And it ran a circular route to the north towards West Bay, and then when you got to the roundabout by the public beach, then it went west and you went on the old 7 Mile Beach Road and back on to where Cost You Less is. The area was well marked out with cones, and we had marshals at the intersections to control traffic. And drivers were very, very courteous and understanding. And I say most drivers, I should say. 99.99% of the drivers were that way. But we had one taxi driver who, when I flagged him down to stop because a huge group of cyclists at that time were approaching the merge point where traffic would merge, coming from the south as well as coming from the northeast. And when I flagged him down, the taxi driver said, "They're supposed to wait for me. I'm not supposed to wait for them." And I said to him, "Can you just be patient? There's a race going on." Now, it is one thing if riders are just riding on the road and we hear drivers complain about cyclists riding too abreast, and we try to encourage our cyclists not to do that. In this case, it was a race. It was a controlled race. It was a race that was being assisted by the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service as well in terms of the marshalling of the race. So this driver was extremely impatient without recognizing the fact that it was a race that was taking place, not a leisure ride. And I only mention this to say that riders, cyclists on the road, and there are not only recreational cyclists who use the road, that there are cyclists who use the road every day to go back and forth to work, and some do it to do their whatever chores it is that they have to do, their shopping, whatever. Some people use the roads as well. So we have to share the road. We have to share the road. We have to be respectful of others on the road. But vehicle drivers need to also understand that the roads are not exclusively for them, because the way some drivers drive on the road, they drive like they own the road. And in many instances, some of them, when they drive that way, they end up owning CUCs, light poles, or someone else's concrete wall as well, when they think and when they drive the same way that they think as well. So again, my clarion call to you out there, drivers and cyclists alike, share the roads, be respectful and understanding of each other's. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor. I have no guest in the studio at this point in time, but we hope to have them. If not, we will tell you what's happening as far as that goes. Please stay tuned, as we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor, and we will be discussing household budget survey and other financial matters as well, as we will have Minister Marco Archer in the studio with us shortly. We know what it is like out there in the traffic and everything else, so we can certainly empathize, with him being stuck in traffic. But I promise you, he will be here. Let's look at other news here. Looking at the Washington Post, for instance, it is official. Ted Cruz announces his 2016 candidacy. And I will say no more than say, God help America if he becomes president. God help America if he becomes president. Going back to the cycling situation, and someone communicated to me that we should also call on cyclists to ensure that rather than riding against traffic, they should ride with traffic. There are many people out there who, again, give cyclists a bad name because of the way that they approach the roads and the way that they conduct themselves on the roads. And we asked them to continue to observe traffic. I remember in my younger days when you had gentlemen like Mr. Royal Anderson, policeman in Georgetown, and things were not so serious at that point in time in the Cayman Islands, are not as challenging as they are now. And they would hold you and chase you down for simple infractions as to riding without a light or riding with a bicycle that was not proper, wasn't licensed. They would chase you down and you end up going to court for that. Of course, nowadays we have so many people on the roads, and there's so many other issues that the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service has to deal with, that it's extremely difficult to go ahead and police those cases. But again, cyclists observe the rules of the road. Drivers, you also observe the rules of the road. And remember that a cyclist on the road is very similar to any other vehicle on the road. They have the exact same rights. We have a caller online, so we're going to take that caller now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning. How are you?
Like to talk to you a little about the passing of Lee Kuan Yew, who was a significant contributor to hope against all odds. The first Prime Minister of Singapore, bringing a country from under colonial rule back in 1959, as the first premier, and becoming first Prime Minister in 1963, somewhere around there. He took a country that was landmined, figuratively, in post-colonial Singapore, where after the colonial masters left, the Malays were left against the Chinese and against Indians. But Lee Kuan Yew had a vision for a country which had very little resources in a very volatile region, and had a dream to make it a prosperous country that would be not trickle-down prosperity, but prosperity in literal terms for all. Now, he took some serious measures to make sure that worked, which included the translation into having an American youngster spanked in public because he broke their laws.
Right.
Spitting gun and doing. He wrote graffiti on the walls or spat gum in the street, got caught. And even though President Clinton requested clemency, he was spanked. And that was a message to the world. You don't mess with people who have rules and want to do something good about their country, irrespective of where you're from and who you think you are.
Exactly, and you don't try to impose your values on other people.
Yes. And you respect other people's values as you have come to their country. The country came from nowhere back in the 50s in terms of an economy. In fact, Lee Kuan Yew was very impressed with Jamaica's economic template of the early 60s on the Bustamante and Donald Shanks, who was finance minister, who was briefly Prime Minister of Jamaica for 6 months. But Jamaica had quite an interesting template, and he was very, very admirable of that. And in fact, he took a good part of it and applied it to creating the new Singapore. And then he lamented in his memoirs that in spite of the fact that he had an admiration for Jamaica, with all of Jamaica's lovely resources, natural environment for cultivating wealth and prosperity, he was disappointed that they could not convert what they had as a gem to what he visioned.
And Carl, if I may, there are a lot of people even here in the Cayman Islands that talk about government shouldn't be into certain sectors of the economy. But what he did in Singapore also, and which is described as an economic miracle, was that they had a mixture of private and state capitalism. Those two things were combined together to create a successful Singapore.
Public-private partnership was at the very heart of his ethos, and he embraced elements from everywhere. His education started in the East, and then he ended up at Cambridge as an economist.
Mm-hmm.
He came back home. He learned the lessons that he did not want to see happen in his country, and he applied a very significant template, which was to get a team of rivals. They were disparate in their ethnic origins, but they were all Singaporeans, Malay Singaporeans, Indian Singaporeans, Chinese Singaporeans, and they had disparate values. And as I was saying, as the British ceded Singapore its independence, the country was landmined to go into cultural explosion. They were set up against each other to make sure it didn't work. However, this man was bright enough to find a common thread amongst a group of people who had a common vision, who understood that discipline was important, integrity was important, and the application of all of the principles of success could not be devoid of one single important thing: a moral respect for all the peoples of his country. Nobody should be left behind. And as a result, it did translate into a country that was a little difficult for people to live who could not understand discipline, which is if you committed a crime by being a drug mule, you were going to be hung.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody who was going to tell them not to hang you. And in being very strong and strict about that, they have one of the lowest crime rates in the world.
Exactly.
Along with having one of the most prosperous economies in the world.
Yeah. Carl, I'm going to ask you to leave us there. We have one more caller, and we're going to try to deal with that caller before our 8 o'clock news, but certainly feel free to call back. And if you don't, I'm sure that during the course of the week, you and I will converse over the telephone.
Most certainly.
Thanks a lot. Next caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning, Amjad. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Hope you had a great weekend.
Yes. I hope yours was good too.
It was, thanks.
Okay. I want to address number of issues quickly here. Number one, the issue of the Cayman Island flag. I think if you look, Mr. O'Connor, to the government buildings, all government buildings, where is the Cayman Island flag being displayed? It displayed in a miserable way. It looked bad, dirty flag, look, in a bad shape. It is very shameful that, for Georgetown Police Station, this issue of the flag I brought it myself, long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Other people being brought the issue, and the talk show hosts Austin Harris and Jonathan.
I think they donated a flag to them, did they?
Flag, yes. I thank them for doing that. They have at least there is a Caymanians who have loyalty to the flag of this country, and they care how this flag being displayed. But unfortunately, that lady in charge of the Georgetown Police Station, she basks under that flag every morning. And she always in the road anyway, so she going and coming in.
Amjad, if you want to discuss all of your other things, you say you had a few things, you got to be fast. You want to have about 3 minutes before we go to the news.
I just blaming that lady in charge of the police station, how that flag being displayed. That's one. Number two, the government, our untruthful government, they are saying the unemployment is going down. Unemployment. And I'm telling the government that is untruthful and unhonest when you telling the Caymanian people that unemployment is gone down. It has gone up. I can see more people losing their jobs in this country. There is no hope.
So, Amjad, how you're able to get that information and the government can't? Are you talking about anecdotal situations where you know a few persons who are unemployed? How do you get your information?
Because, Mr. O'Connor, it is an easy thing to know how an employment issue by going, sitting next to that in that downstairs coffee shop one time for an hour and see the amount of people going up and down in that employment agency, the government employment agency. You ask the people how many months you applying. Some tell you 3 years, some tell you 2 years, and more people, you ask them, do you was working? They say, yes, we lose our job. A lot of people telling me these days they are losing their job.
Okay,
Amjad. Because
very quickly, we got 15 seconds left. I have to break for the news because I have no control over that.
Okay, but I think the government needs to be truthful, make laws, protect the Caymanian people, and start tell lies to the people about employment.
Okay,
Amjad. Employment is a problem in this country, and it needs to be solved.
I agree that it needs to be solved, and it's something that should easily be solved with the numbers that we have. We have to go now, but please feel free to call back if you so wish after the news. Folks, we're going to take a break now for a time check and then the 8 o'clock news. Please stay tuned as we will be back immediately after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I am your host, Orrit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Marco Archer, Minister of Finance, with us in the studio as well. And before I hand over to Minister Archer, I want to just mention again the conversation that we had with the last caller, Amjad, and just to say that I share his views in terms of the resolving the unemployment situation in the Cayman Islands. What I believe needs to happen is that we need to be able to get exact figures, correct figures on the unemployment situation in the Cayman Islands. I believe that the National Workforce Development Agency or some other agency in government needs to put out statistics. If I try to find them and I can't find them, put out figures in terms of how many people actually don't have a job, who are looking for a job, as opposed to those who may have a job but feel that it is not the right job for them, it is not the job that they're qualified for or the job that they would like to be in. We need to be able to separate those figures, because in being able to separate those, that gives you the ability to tackle the issue and also to give a proper presentation to the public, as opposed to it appearing to be a guessing game in terms of how many people. Now, we see in the news today where there are only about 600 persons registered with the National Workforce Development Agency. If there are only 600 people registered, does that mean then that there are only 600 people unemployed in the Cayman Islands? Very difficult to know, but those are the answers that we need to. But without any further ado, Minister Archer, I want to again wish you a good morning and welcome you again to For the Record.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I want to say good morning to the listening public. And I wish you all a very enjoyable and productive week and safe travels as you make your way to work. And I guess together this morning we will be able to share some valuable information and do as we always do, which is to keep the country informed as to what is happening and what they can expect in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, and we're going to talk this morning about the household budget survey, something that some people may not place a lot of value and importance on, but it is extremely valuable, not only to the government, but for others as well, Minister.
That's correct, Mr. Connor. The household budget survey, the purpose of the survey, of course, is to ascertain, how the consumption pattern in the country has changed since the last survey was conducted, which I think was in 2007. From the survey, we hope to identify the new goods and services that are being consumed, and how we should incorporate those into the consumer price index, the basket of goods and services that make up the consumer price index. The information, of course, is used by businesses in terms of whether or not they would determining whether or not inflation is rising or whether its prices are declining. It's also used by the ERA to help regulate the rate increases by CUC. It is also used by the pensions board, the Public Service Pensions Board, with respect to determining whether or not to award or to increase pensionable payments to the retired people. So you can see there how it impacts the lives of everyone, whether you're retired or working, whether you are wealthy or poor. It still impacts your life, and it's absolutely important that we do collect this information and that it is accurate and therefore reliable with respect to the purpose for which it is collected.
Mm-hmm. And the survey started sometime in January of this year, and it'll has it been completed yet? In terms of
No, it started in January. It will run until December. So it covers the full calendar year of 2015. And the purpose for that, of course, is to capture all expenditures throughout the year, given that you make different purchases around summer than you do at December. Of course, you also include in that your vacations, which would be your summer, your expenditure in that area. So it covers the full spectrum. We don't quite have the seasons as you would find in other countries where you would do different things, but our consumption pattern does vary somewhat from January to December. It's not constant.
What can we do to help the public understand the importance of completing this survey? How can we encourage them to participate in it, and how does the process all play out, Minister?
Thank you. Various things here. Number one, you are not purposely selected. You were selected randomly. The survey covers 1,400 households across the 3 islands, and 110 households are surveyed each month. So if you are selected, please don't think that for some reason you are being targeted. You are chosen purely at random. Another reason for ensuring that you do complete the survey is that you want to make sure that the things on which you consume, what you spend your money on, are reflected in the final statistics. If you should decide you're not, going to participate, well then there's a possibility that if other people take the view as someone else may do in terms of not wanting to participate, well then you may find yourself at the end of the day where the items that you purchase most, that really reflect a significant portion of your expenditure, may be given a lesser weight because fewer people would have said, well, we spend our money on these things. So it is absolutely important that you do report accurately what you do spend your money on, to ensure that the things that are important to you, obviously we only spend money on the things that are important to us. So you want to ensure that you report the things that you spend your money on so that you are guaranteed that the importance, with respect to the word importance, I'm talking about the weight that is given to those items. That is accurately reflected in the calculation of the CPI with respect to those particular goods and services. I'll explain it this way. For the entire country, the items that are reflected in this consumer price index, the basket of goods and services, different categories would be given different weights. But the weight that is given to each item in each category is determined based on the amount of money that people say they spend on those things. So therefore, the more people report that they spend on a particular item in terms of the amount of money that they spend on it, the higher weight is given to that. So you would think that things such as food as a category would have a significant weight. Mortgages would also have a significant weight. Electricity would also have a significant weight. So it is important that you report accurately what you spend and don't hold back the information, because holding it back may actually be to your own detriment in that that category would be underreported and therefore given a lower weight.
Yeah, and at the same time that you say don't hold back, you don't want people to exaggerate either.
Absolutely. Don't exaggerate and don't hold back. Just be honest about it. It is, at the end of the day, the information is aggregated. So no one will be looking to see exactly what you spent as a household. It is aggregated.
And the interview itself does require some face-to-face, with an interviewer as well.
Precisely. There are interviewers who are trained and would know how to conduct these interviews. They visit you. They leave you a questionnaire, or 2 questionnaires to be completed, and they leave you a notebook in which you can write down certain purchases. And they would explain to you what has to be done. They could do the questionnaires at that stage, or they could do it when they come back 2 weeks later. And when you are selected, you are only selected. The survey, your involvement in the survey, only lasts for 2 weeks. The survey itself lasts for the entire year, but your involvement as a household is only for 2 weeks. So they will come to you at the start, and they will leave you with the questionnaires and the little memory jogger, it's called. And then 2 weeks later, they come back to you and they collect that information. So they're just asking you to track and record your purchases for 2 weeks. That's it.
And so far, have you received any reports back from people who are out in the field in terms of the level of cooperation that they're receiving from the public?
The cooperation has been fairly good. It's 110 households is selected each month, and so far the response rate has been well above 50%, and refusals are less than 2%. So we're doing very well in terms of our response rate. So we expect that the information should be very, very good, very reliable.
Okay. And then after the year of doing this, then we get the results then in 2016 as opposed to 2015. And then how does that translate into the actions that will take place? You mentioned things like public pensions will look into it, and determine whether or not cost of living increases are warranted. Government in general as well, for its employees also, even though government's ability to award cost of living increase is going to be determined by the funds that they have in their budgets. But
precisely, that's a very good point there. The government, as you would recall, we just awarded a 4% increase in salary. Now that was a 3.2% that was given some years ago, and then taken back because it was felt that the government could not afford it. That 3.2% was a cost of living adjustment. Now, to identify a cost of living adjustment, you need accurate and reliable consumer price index statistics. So this information helps to inform government in years to come as to how reliable is the inflation statistics or the consumer price index, and based on that information, well then, what would be a reasonable cost of living adjustment for the government or for any other employer out there who is employing people within the Cayman Islands. So it's absolutely important that this information is seen for its real value, which is to inform in policy decision and analysis. There's also the question that you asked as to when does this information start to be used within the government. As early as next year, June, this information will be factored into the consumer price index basket of goods and services. So it'll be reflected in the next year, 2016 CPI, but next year, June.
Okay.
Given that it would take several months to collate and analyze and include the statistics in the program now.
And for those of you in the public domain, those are listeners and others, it's important for you to know that this isn't something that has been concocted by the Cayman Islands government to say, well, this is what we want to do. This is an internationally accepted way of being able to get information. All of the European Union countries conduct such a survey as well, and almost every industrialized country in the world conducts it as well, because that is one of the tools that you're able to use to measure how consumption is taking place.
Yes, and all of our surveys that we conduct in the Economics and Statistics Office, they are all done to. Thank you. They're all done to standards that are established by the United Nations and its affiliate agencies with respect to the proper methodology to conduct these surveys, because you want to ensure that the integrity of data collection is there, and you want to ensure that the statistics are comparable across countries. So the Cayman Islands done extremely well since I would say the late 70s, early 80s, in working with the United Nations, the IMF, and various supranational bodies to determine and design the proper survey and data collection methodology.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Marco Archer, who's the Minister of Finance and Economics. He's also the MLA representing, one of the MLAs, I should say, representing the District of Georgetown. We're discussing the household budget survey in the Cayman Islands that has taken place. It commenced on the 11th of January, and it, as you heard him say, it continues for the rest of the year. We're going to be discussing more details. If you have any questions in relation to that survey, if you've had people visit your homes and interviewed you in that regard, you may want to call and tell us about your experience, or if you have any questions related to it, please do so. We're going to go to a commercial break at this point in time. Please stay tuned, as we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I am your host, Orit Connor, and I have in the studio with me this morning, our guest is the Honorable Marco Archer, who's the Minister of Finance and Economics in the Cayman Islands government. He's also one of the elected members of the Legislative Assembly representing the District of Georgetown. Of course, he couldn't be a minister, unless he was elected. We're not like some other countries that have bicameral legislature, and what we mean by that is that they have two houses. They have a Senate, and you have a House of Representatives. And in those countries where you have senators who are appointed either by the government or by the opposition, those senators are allowed to become ministers. In the Cayman Islands, you have to be a member of the Legislative Assembly to be a minister. And of course, if you're part of the ruling party or group that gains control of the has the largest numbers in the Legislative Assembly, then you have the opportunity to be chosen by that group or by your party to be a minister. We're discussing the household budget survey in the Cayman Islands, and my question, Minister, is with so many advancements in technology, will it ever come down to the day where a survey like this would take place online as opposed to visiting households, bearing in mind that there will always be persons out there who may not have access to the latest technology in terms of being to complete a survey online?
That's a very good, very good question. When you think about it, we have been improving the use of technology, or increasing the use of technology within the government, and primarily the Economics and Statistics Office. The most recent labor force survey, the one that was conducted in October 2014, they used iPads for that, which has significantly increased the time within which we are able to get the results. I had a meeting recently with the business community, and one of the things that we agreed was that we would try to put in place a online reporting for the System of National Accounts survey, which would obviously improve the speed at which the survey is conducted and the confidentiality of the information. So it is quite possible that the next time we conduct a household budget survey, we could really look to ways in which we could minimize the time that interviewers will spend in the field, and obviously improve the chances of respondents providing the information without having to interact with an interviewer. So it's quite possible we could, with whoever's selected, you give them an iPad or something of that sort to use for the 2-week period, or give them a unique identification number, and then have them report the information online. So you go to the store, you purchase something. Well, you're sitting in traffic, you say, let me update my record online for the household budget survey, and you do that over your smartphone. You just access the website, the government's website, and you update your record. You're at the beauty salon, you are having your hair done, and you're doing nothing else. You're just sitting there. You go on your smartphone and you update accordingly. So it is something to look forward to. I'm sure it can be done.
In determining, we have the whole discussion taking place now about minimum wage, and we have the minimum wage advisory group committee that has been out there talking to the public and everything else. Again, would the results of this household survey render any assistance to those who are considering whether or not we should have a minimum wage and what it should be and where it should be applied?
The benefit of the household budget survey with respect to the minimum wage is that it helps to determine an increase in the minimum wage rate in years going forward, should the government choose or decide to implement it. Right? It's not a fait accompli. All we have so far is just a report. So we still have to analyze and make a decision as to whether or not it is something to do. But having the CPI information, which we would then get from the household budget survey, that enables you to determine, okay, well, has the cost of living really increased significantly that would warrant an increase in the minimum wage rate in years to come?
Right.
Or if it hasn't increased, well, then that in itself would be justification for not increasing it. Because, of course, while the cost of living increased some significantly during the recession period, primarily because of the rising cost of oil, right? Globally, we've also seen the price of oil decline significantly in the last 9 months from about summer last year. So you can see that while oil contributed to an increase, it's also contributed to a decrease. The CPI for the year 2014 was only 1.3, right? And that also declined, I think, from the previous year, or pretty much held steady. I'll look in a second to see exactly what it was. In 2013, it was 2.2. So, you can see it trending
Downwards, yes.
Yeah, so,
yes.
it's and that is obviously, I want people to understand, that is the overall average, right? Certain components within the overall may have increased, some would have decreased, but the ones with the bigger weights would obviously have a greater impact on this statistic. So 2002, I'll just name some of them. Sorry, not 2002. 2012, it was 1.2. 2013, it was 2.2. 2014, it's 1.3 percentage change.
Okay.
So, you see the declining.
Yeah. We have a couple of callers online, so we're going to take those callers now. Ms. Susan, first caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Rupert. How are you?
All right, man. Good morning, Mr. Archer. And I want to tell you, congratulations. I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, sir.
Keep it up, because everybody's singing your praises.
Thank you. Good morning, too.
Including myself. But what I wanted to say, this one I can make it brief. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had, like in other places, I know in the United States they have it, it's called a Consumer Protection Agency. The reason why I say that is, Mr. Minister, is that I went into the telephone company the other day, and I had to put my little top off on it, because I use $40 thing. They and of course you got to have that extra $5 to do your thing. So I went in to put in this, and I went away. My thing done it so quickly. And I called Digicel, because if you call Digicel or you call Cable and Wireless from the other one, then the price goes up. But I was shocked when somebody who works there told me that it's 48 cents per minute for me to call from my Cable and Wireless phone to Digicel. Now, we live in the Cayman Islands. Both telephone companies are here. And I can call the United States for 20 cents a minute, but I got to spend 48 cents a minute to call from one phone company to the other in the Cayman Islands. It sounds ridiculous. I think this is something that government has to look into, because it's poor people who suffer from this more than anybody else. Okay? And that's my thing this morning, because those things aggravate me, because I don't think it's necessary, and it hurts people. It hurts the poor, So that's my 2 cents for the morning. I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you. I think, but before you go, Rupert, I think Minister Archer probably has a question or something for you, Minister.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Rupert, first for the kind words, and then second for the call. Mr. Rupert, what I would advise you to do, I will try to remember what you said, but it spans two ministries, so to speak, if I'm thinking clearly this morning. It's obviously the Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Industry,
Right.
Which would have overall responsibility for the ICTA, Information Communications Technology Authority.
Okay.
And then it also spans commerce, which would be Minister Panton's domain. Now, consumer protection, of course, is all of our responsibility. But what I would like you to do, Mr. Rupert, is report that particular matter to the ICTA, because what we tend to do is we tend to ask the authorities for information and complaints, and then that helps us inform our policy decision making. Because of course, if you report it to us and we forget it for whatever reason, and it's not reported to the relevant authority, then when we try to collect information, we may miss something. But I hear what you're saying. I'm not informed enough on the communications. I think they call termination rates. Termination rates as to how they're arrived at and how they're regulated. But if that is reported to the ICTA, well then they may be able to guide us properly as to whether or not that particular termination rate is too high, too low, if it's something that can be done about it.
Yep. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be comparable to other jurisdictions as well. Yes, we know, Mr. Rupert, that we talk about the small size of our population here as opposed to other jurisdictions, but then the 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 technology that is now available that makes it so much easier and so much cheaper for these things to be done, there's no reason why it still has to be so high. But we want to thank Mr. Rupert for that caller. Ms. Susan, do we have another caller online? No other caller online at this point in time. Should we go to a commercial break now? And then we'll come back, folks. I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Honorable Marco Archer, who's the Minister of Finance and Economics in the Cayman Islands government. We're discussing the household budget survey. We also want to talk about budget preparation because we're now in March. Budget will be in June, I believe, Minister Archer.
Actually, we're going to take the budget to the House in May.
In May. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So getting close. So maybe you might be able to give us a little tip here and there in terms of what's happening. So please stay tuned if you want to hear anything that the minister wants to say. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Dorit Connor, and I have as my guest in the studio with me this morning the Honorable Marco Archer, who's the Minister of Finance and Economics in the Cayman Islands government. He's also a member of the Legislative Assembly representing the District of Georgetown. We've been talking about the household budget survey. But there's only so much that we can talk about, in relation to that survey at this point in time because we don't have the final figures in yet. And of course, as you heard, this survey will continue throughout the rest of the year, even though the face-to-face part of it where your involvement would be concerned is, lasts for about 2 weeks. But after that, then we have to take all of the numbers and crunch them and put them in the proper categories and everything else. And next year you will have an idea, you have a good idea of, what the situation will look like at that point in time. You also heard the minister, before we went to a commercial break, mention the fact that the budget will actually be going to the Legislative Assembly in May of this year, which means that there has been ongoing work in terms of the budget preparation, and that obviously must be going pretty smoothly if he's able now to tell us that they will be going there in May. We have seen in the past, with all administrations where there sometimes have been delays in terms of presenting a budget, mainly because of the iron fist that the UK government has held over us, and we're hoping to get out from under that iron fist soon as well, as far as the FFR is concerned. I'm told that we have one caller online, so Minister, before we get back to that subject, we're going to take that caller. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, sir.
Okay, yes, good morning, Mr. Archer, and especially good morning to you, yes, Minister Archer.
Good morning, Mr. Orrick. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. I'll just call in to find out when the public will know what the minimum wage is, and also I continue to see that people who are advertising work in the newspaper aren't putting their wages in the paper. So I'm hoping that the government will pay attention to this and be sure that this doesn't continue, because I know that is not part of what they're supposed to be doing to make sure that they're publishing correctly. And also when it comes to work permits, I know this for a fact. This isn't hearsay. This is a fact. There are a lot of people who are on work permit and they're paying their own work permits. And also, these employers who are letting these people do that, they also let them pay their full health insurance. They're not paying half the way that they should. And the government needs to get serious with these individuals. We don't have to wait until next election in order to correct these things. And to remember, when it comes to employment, we're doing this for our children and our great-grandchildren. Our forefathers laid the way for us to make sure that employment wouldn't be a problem for us in our lives. And the greatest thing that we have as Caymanians, that's answer. Thank you very much, John.
Caller, before you go, I have a question for you in relation to an observation and then a question in relation to the payment of work permit fees by employees. Do you believe that in those instances where an employee is allowed to freelance by their employer, because there are situations out there where work permits are held for employees, but they're not necessarily working for them, and every week or every paycheck they have to go to that employer and pay them a portion of their wage just for the convenience of them keeping their work permit, holding their work permit for them. And what can we do to combat that? Any observations there?
Well, there are too many Caymanians unemployed in order for a work permit holder to seem as though they're more important. What I see happening here today is like Caymanians no longer need food, clothes, or shelter. That's what it seems like to me, that people are thinking. We're still human beings. So these types of things definitely they have to stop. And gentlemen, the government cannot use the word can't, that they can't get employment for every individual that is unemployed. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, caller. Government can ensure that the environment and the conditions are right for people to be employed, but the government really isn't their responsibility to find employment for them per se, even though there are certain arms of the government like the National Workforce Development Agency that assists in that process. But it's a two-way street, in relation to that. I may say even a three-way street as well, because employers out there have to also have that commitment that they want to employ Caymanians as well.
Thank you for the opportunity, OC. First of all, thank you to Mr. Orrit for his call. With respect to the minimum wage, I think he asked when we would expect to see that.
Mm-hmm.
As I've said earlier, right now all we have is the report. We have to do our own analysis, perhaps consult again with the public as to what may be,
Mm-hmm.
put together the draft legislation, debate it in the House, and then see where it goes. It's probably going to take an important thing to remember too is the timing as to when you would introduce a minimum wage. Yeah, timing is absolutely important. I do agree with him. I do think that it is not right. I think it is against the law for people on work permit to have to pay their own work permit.
Mm-hmm.
That is against the law, and anyone who finds himself in that position, I would think, should be willing to report it. But then again, they may be facilitating something that is to the advantage of the work permit holder. They may otherwise not have a permit, which is why it's being tolerated.
Exactly.
I do think that there is a problem with people having permits and large numbers of permits just to collect a commission on that. I would have to put it that way. That only distorts the labor market, because these aren't people that were brought in by employers to provide work, to do a job. These are people who are speculating, and there is no risk for the work permit holder because he gets a payment without having to provide employment. The work permit holder, I mean the person who's on the work permit, they're out there hustling, hoping to find work. Obviously, the conditions are probably better than the country from which they're coming. So the real winner in this is the person who has these large numbers of work permits, collecting a commission on each person out there who's hustling to find a job.
Exactly. We're going to go to the headline news now at 1 minute before 9 o'clock. I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. And For the Record this morning and today is brought to you by LED Lighting, Engineering, and Design. They're located on Dorsey Drive, and they have lots of energy-saving equipment, light bulbs, and other things there that will help you to reduce your energy bills. And of course, that means that when you do your, when you're participating in the household survey, that you're able to say, well, my electricity bill has gone down this much, and you may know why, not only because of the 25 cents reduction in the duty on fuel, but also because you have energy-saving equipment in your home as well. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where my host is the Honorable Marco Archer, Minister of Finance and Economics in the Cayman Islands government, also one of the members of the Legislative Assembly representing the District of Georgetown. I want to remind you also that our phone lines are still open, and you can call us if you have any questions, observations relating to the topics that we're talking, or any questions that may in some way have some relation to what we're talking about this morning. We're talking about the annual budget survey, the household budget survey. We're also going to be talking about the budget preparations, and we heard earlier the minister say that the budget will be presented to the Legislative Assembly in May of this year. I also want to remind you our toll-free number is 1-800-534 8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, fortherecord at candw.ky. I'm going to throw it right back over to Minister Archer now and give him an opportunity to talk about budget preparation and the various stages that we go through in terms of presenting the budget to the Legislative Assembly. Minister Archer.
Thank you, sir. I want to say thank you again for this opportunity. The budget, it is probably one of the most important events in the calendar year or the fiscal year, however you want to view it, for any country, any government. It sets the stage for what the government intends to do. It also sets the stage for what the business community and households can expect for the period of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we wanted to do when we took office was to ensure that the business community and households in general could feel comfortable with what was happening. The first way to do that, of course, is to ensure that certainty. There's a deadline for the budget. It has to be passed before the end of the fiscal year, which is 30th June. we've always met that, and we want to do that again this year. And I also want to allow sufficient time for discussion in Finance Committee. I think that is helpful for the country. Sometimes the discussions do go off on a tangent that may not perhaps be directly related to the budget itself. But I think, in the end, it always works its way out. So this year, we intend to take the budget to the LA in May, given sufficient time for passage and for the country to know that we will not have a situation as you sometimes see in other countries where things may grind to a halt because the government does not have funds to spend under the law. So our target for this year, the expenditure for this year, is $536.7 million. Call it $537 million. That's the target for the budget. So far, we are doing quite well. We're over by a few million, not a whole lot, but we will be able to resolve that, reconcile those numbers within the coming weeks. We will be meeting with the various ministries, portfolios, and offices to identify how those numbers can be brought to the level that is to comply with the stated agreed target. So this is an annual thing in the government. This happens every year. You always find a situation where the ministers will agree one thing and decide on one thing, and for some reason the budget is prepared by the civil service who will come with a slightly different figure. You just have to sit and talk it through.
Right.
And fortunately, we've always been able to do that within good time, and we have sufficient time again this year to do so. So we are on track. The figure is 536, almost 537 million CI, and we will be there in May, given sufficient time for proper debate, and the country can rest assured that the budget will be passed well in advance of the 30th June deadline, and there will be no reason to panic, and that's how the government and the country should operate. Predictability.
Yeah. You obviously feel quite confident that there will be no issues with the United Kingdom, and there should be none once you're within that target, that 536 point whatever million dollars that has been set.
Absolutely. The UK requires, other than the safety ratios that they have put in place, they require credibility. The budget must be realistic. We've proven that over the years. We've proven that over the last 2 years. We are on target. We are on track to comply with several of their safety ratios that they put there. Of course, there's the 10% debt service ratio. We're on target to comply with that. There is the 90 days of liquidity, cash reserves. We're on target to comply with that, hopefully, by the end of this year, because that's when it's measured at the end of December. They measure at the lowest point in the fiscal period, which is the end of December. So we're on track to comply with those. One of the requirements is that, of course, you must have a positive balanced surplus budget, or I should say just a surplus budget. We will comply with that as well. Net worth must be positive. We will comply with that. So we are well on our way to complying with all of the safety ratios that they have put there for us. Complying with the safety ratios also lends to the credibility. And in the last couple of years, we have been demonstrating to the UK, yes, you have the legal authority via the Constitution. You have the moral authority via your fear of contingent liability. We have the ability.
That's a good saying. That's
That has been our way of operating for the last 2 years, and it will be the way we do so for the next for the remainder of our administration. I think sometimes the country, you're always compared to someone else or something else. Administrations are compared to administrations. And sometimes I think people lose sight of the role of the government and the role of representatives. Everyone has a different style. The government's responsibility is to provide opportunities for the country that fosters growth, development, employment, safety,
Harmony.
good education, healthcare. It all starts with proper finances. I like to say, if you get the economics wrong, then you get the politics wrong. Look throughout the world. Any country that has destroyed and gotten the economics wrong, the politics is also wrong. Many times it's the wrong politics that destroys economics.
Yep.
Yeah. So everyone has a different style. Some people are more aggressive than others. Some people are more reserved, but just proving themselves competent and getting the job done and creating the environment within which opportunities arise, and those who want to go forth and participate are able to do so.
Now, we've seen, Minister, in the trend in other countries, and we see worldwide where 1% of the population controls 90% of the wealth in the country. What can our budgets do here to ensure that the gap between the rich and the poor doesn't continue to widen?
Yeah. Oh, see, that's not so much a budget issue. That is more of a overall policy and direction that a government chooses to take. But the limited role in which the budget might play in doing that is you would to ensure that happened, you would have to increase taxation, which we have not done and which we will not do. We do not need to do it. We have found a way to control expenditure. The way to do what you're saying to ensure that the income distribution gap does not widen, you would have to increase taxation and increase your spending on social services. The government has not increased taxation, and it has held steady, and in some cases even increased the expenditure on social services, education, healthcare, payments to the elderly, and even the social services benefits. And we've done things that even increases the purchasing power of the people on social services benefits. When we took office, the vouchers were the method of receiving benefits. But those vouchers were not accepted in, or could not be used in the wholesale outlets like Price Right. Primarily, that was because I think it may have been on instructions of the Social Services Department. I might not get the names of the departments right. They change them too often.
Children and Family Services.
Children and Family Services. If I remember correctly, I think that was on the instructions of that department because, of course, it is often abused. We hear stories of people getting their vouchers and giving it directly to their drug supplier, right? So we thought, how can this be improved? A lady called me one day. She said, Marco, I have a problem. My mother's elderly. The voucher only goes so far in Foster's. We can't use it at Price Right. And we talked about it. I said, I see exactly what you're saying. Discussed it with my colleagues. Spoke with the minister responsible for the Department of Children and Family Services. And they were already thinking about the card system. I spoke with the various wholesalers and said, okay, you sell things wholesale. They excuse me, excuse me. In the end, what we decided to do was to take use the card system not just in the retail supermarkets, but also in the wholesale. So instead of going and buying a 6 pack of Ensure, which elderly people would drink, or even a 2 cans of tuna at the retail price, you could go to the wholesale and purchase it in bulk.
Yep.
So the unit cost of each bottle of Ensure then dropped significantly, right? So those are some of the ways in which it's about, one, working with the community, the business community; two, educating your people as to how they go about making wiser choices with the limited cash they have. Everyone has limited cash. Everyone. I don't care how rich you are, right? Everyone has limited amounts of money. Working with them, educating them, and saying, this is how you do it. So the way to do what you asked would have to do with increasing taxation and increasing expenditure on the poorer class. We're not increasing taxation. We have found a way to keep our costs down. And we have held steady and in some cases increased expenditure for those people who depend on the government for assistance.
Okay, Minister, we're going to take a break at this point in time. We have one caller online. We're going to take that caller after the break, so we're going to ask that caller to please stay online as we're going to take a very short break, and we will be back with you. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, Honorable Marco Archer, Minister of Finance and Economics in the government of the Cayman Islands, also member of the Legislative Assembly representing the District of Georgetown. We have one caller online, so we're going to take that caller now. I think that caller has actually rejoined us. So again, caller, good morning and welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning again, Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Archer.
Good morning again.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, I do agree that government aren't able to do all in order for people to find employment. I believe we have to do our part too. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Every morning when I see the school buses going up with our school children, taking them to school, it's a great concern of mine. When I see them, when it comes to employment for them after they finish their schoolwork and being given the opportunity that they need to be the people that they need to be in their lives. I have a question for Mr. Archer also. I was hoping to ask Minister Hunton this question, but hopefully Mr. Archer is able to answer the best he can.
Okay.
I heard on the news that England has joined China with a World Bank that China has just started.
England among several other countries.
Yes. And the United States has said it's a great concern of theirs that England has become a member of this bank. And Australia has rejected from joining them. Why is it a great concern of the United States, Mr. Archer, that the UK has become a member of this bank? And for what reason has Australia rejected? And it seems as though the United States aren't willing to join them either. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Orrit. It all has to do with geopolitics. Number one, there's the great struggle between the U.S. and China. Of course, the U.S. is still the largest economy. China has increased and grew by leaps and bounds in the last 30 years to where they leapfrogged Japan as the second largest economy. Now China is the second largest economy. Obviously, the U.S. does not want China to overtake them as the world's largest economy.
And being able to influence.
And that is where the establishment of another World Bank is of significance. Right now, the U.S. is probably the largest contributor to the World Bank and the IMF. The IMF deals with macroeconomic stability. The World Bank deals with growth and development projects. Now, if the U.S. is the largest contributor to the World Bank, obviously every country who depends on the World Bank for assistance knows this. So they're going to want to dance to the fiddle of the United States. China obviously realized that. China is pushing to become the world number one economy as well as the world's number one superpower in terms of military might. So obviously they can't wrestle the World Bank away from the United States. So they have gone to create their own World Bank. Now, I can't say as to why the UK would have joined China. I'm not really certain. The US and the UK have always had very good relations. They've always moved in tandem with most things. I too am surprised that the UK would choose to join China in this regard. I can understand why Australia opted not to go with China, again because of China being the aggressor in the region.
And the spheres of influence that it would have, yeah.
Exactly. So I can understand why China is doing what it's doing. I can understand why the US is concerned. I can understand why Australia opted not to join. The only one that I don't understand is the UK as to why they did what they did. And hopefully that is of assistance to the young man. But it has to do with geopolitics and everyone trying to become the world's number one, be that in economic might or military might.
And we see here also, I'm looking at a Guardian article, Minister Archer, and they actually received critical support from the International Monetary Fund and the Asian Development Bank, in terms of establishing this multilateral lending agency as well. So despite the fact that the U.S., and as opposed to it, and you have pointed out why, the geopolitics and everything that go to play into it, that those leading institutions are also welcoming the move by China.
Precisely. So it's I don't pretend to understand all the issues that happen in the bigger countries, but at the end of the day, we somehow are affected by it. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually. Mm-hmm. So it may be that they all see something that the U.S. doesn't, and that's why they've decided to join with it. Okay,
Minister, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give you an opportunity for some closing comments. And I will preface that by saying we keep seeing the numbers as far as unemployed Caymanians, the unemployment rate, or the numbers. We see recently that somewhere about 600 persons are registered with the National Workforce Development Agency. We seem to have a difficulty getting a grip on the numbers in terms of, how many people, whether they're underemployed, unemployed, or otherwise. How difficult it is for the Cayman Islands government to be able to tackle the issue of unemployment, whether perceived or otherwise, if you're not able to get the figures, the figures correct.
Oh, see, the most first of all, let me distinguish between the NWDA and the labor force survey results. The NWDA requires a positive effort on the part of the unemployed. You must make an effort to register, right? So if you only have 600 people registered, well, it means that obviously not everyone who's unemployed has made the effort to register. Unless people are motivated to actually go and register, then you're not gonna. Those numbers aren't gonna grow. And I'll be honest. There are some people who are unemployed that really and truly perhaps may not want to be employed. Let's be fair.
Yeah, that is true.
Let's be fair.
That's true.
There are some people who are unemployed who may not want to be employed. I receive calls on some occasions and I try to assist and I come to the conclusion, well, perhaps they were not serious about finding, right? I'm the type of politician or representative who really and truly, I don't say what is popular. I say what I experience, what I see. So the fact that there's only 600 people on the NWDA website means that all of those who are unemployed have not made the effort to go and register. Now, because someone hasn't made the effort to go and register does not mean that they themselves do not want to be employed. Perhaps they're just trying to find work on their own, right? Now, distinguishing between the NWDA website and the labor force survey. The labor force survey is not an accurate figure, but a very good estimate of the number of people who are unemployed. Now, the NWDA website says 600. The labor force survey says 1,562 Caymanians and 298 non-Caymanians who are unemployed. According to the labor force survey, October 2014. So 1,562 Caymanians, 298 non-Caymanians for a total of 1,859. That figure has declined by 23% when compared to October 2013, where it was 2,415.
Okay.
Right?
And that survey, how are those figures derived?
That's a 6% sample. They go visiting households, randomly selected households, and they survey the people using questionnaires. So, and to be counted as unemployed, there's a reference week. So I think it's probably, let's just say it was the last week of October 2014. I can't remember the exact week it was, but within that week they will conduct a survey, and you must be willing and able to work, and you must have sought employment. You must have applied for a job within the last 6 months, I think is what it is. So just being unemployed doesn't mean that you're going to be covered. You must be willing and able and have sought to try to find a job.
Now, there are other jurisdictions that have other tools that they can use. For instance, in the United States, for instance, the number of people who are out seeking unemployment assistance because they have lost their job. So it makes it much easier for them to get those figures, as it is challenging for us to be able to get them. But yet, I personally say that because the numbers are so small, that there must be some other way for us to really get real figures in terms of the number of persons unemployed in Cayman.
Yeah, in the U.S. they can do that quite easily because they have the unemployment benefit, which you obviously pay towards as part of your direct taxation.
Right.
So once a person loses their job, they go and apply for these benefits. We don't have that in Cayman. What the closest thing we have to that is the Department of Children and Family Services, but there are certain economists who believe that the U.S. unemployment rate would have declined faster if they did not have that unemployment benefit, because once people were getting it, then they were comfortable and were able to be sustained by that, and therefore there was no real incentive to go back out and look for work.
Yeah, even though it lasts for an for a finite period of time.
Yes. So our most reliable method right now, I wouldn't say most reliable, but accepted right now would be the labor force survey because it's older. It's been going on for well over a decade.
Okay.
And because the surveyors come to the people, the NWDA website can be greatly beneficial, but it would only record the information of those who actually made the effort to register. So that's the difference between the two.
Okay. And if you want to be counted, then you need to ensure that you're registered. Final closing comments, Minister.
Just want to say thank you. We spoke about the household budget survey, gave you an update on that. We spoke about the labor force survey. The results for that, of course, unemployment overall is down to 4.7% overall, and then 7.9 for Caymanians, compared to 6.3 overall in 2013 and 9.4 overall. I mean, for Caymanians in 2013. So the numbers are declining. We spoke about the budget. Target of $536.7 million. We will take the budget to the LA in May. And there's also the System of National Accounts survey that will start at the end of this year. And from that survey, we will be able to determine our GDP for the year of 2014. And I've had two very good meetings with the business community that run quite contrary to an article that was in the paper just last week Wednesday. I thought the article was I was greatly disappointed by the article. For one, it commented on a law that is 4 years old. I don't know why you would seek to criticize someone who found a law 4 years old. I can only wonder as to why they didn't comment earlier. Why they didn't comment as to when the law was gazetted. One of them is a lawyer. Both of them are former legislators who would have known that laws are public once gazetted. So they've had 4 years to comment on this law. Yet, despite me clarifying the position some weeks or months ago in another article to the editor, another letter to the editor, they still raise issues that were clarified then. I have been meeting with the business community. We have come to an agreement on many of those points, and so I found that letter most unfortunate. I think it did nothing to encourage the community to participate in government surveys, yet recognizing that the government needs information to make prudent decisions, be they social or financial or economic or whatever. So I will be responding to that article, and I will be pointing out the fallacy with which the letter is conceived. So the System of National Accounts survey starts in March, and we will then be able to produce our GDP statistics for the calendar year 2014. And fortunately, I was able to meet with the business community on 2 occasions, and we've resolved all of the issues before that letter was written.
Okay. Ms. Archer, again, want to thank you for being on For the Record, for making a very difficult topic or difficult topics easy to understand to our listening audience by putting it in simple terms so that they can understand, and I'm sure that they're extremely appreciative, of that as well. As far as the some of the press is concerned here in the Cayman Islands, the printed press, we know that they try to determine the shape and composition of governments in the Cayman Islands, and that has been in the past, and it continues up until this day, as well. And is that really the purpose of the press? And sometimes that is why they have to be squeezed. Sometimes they're squeezed by governments because of their intentions and the way that they go about trying to undermine governments as well. Folks, I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I've been your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning was the Honorable Marco Archer, Minister of Finance and Economics in the government of the Cayman Islands, and also a member of the Legislative Assembly who represents the District of Georgetown. I say to you, we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't, then you should give to a worthy charity. I also ask you to consider not those who want, but those who need. I say to our drivers on the road and our cyclists, share the road. Cyclists, your head, your helmet, or whatever else is no harder than those bumpers on the cars. And I say to the drivers in the cars that, we are very vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, and we need your assistance and your care in driving to ensure that the roads are safe for all of us. I urge you to continue to listen to Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Durian Ebanks this afternoon on Talk Today, and always continue to listen to your number one radio station, your radio station, Radio Cayman. Have a great day and God bless.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.